The entire restaurant went silent the moment Vivienne Harrow walked through the doors. Forks stopped halfway to mouths, conversations disappeared, and even the managers straightened their jackets as if they were facing a judge. Everyone knew what happened when Vivienne was displeased. Employees had been reduced to tears over a wrong glass, a slow greeting, or a wrinkle in a tablecloth. But that afternoon, something happened that no one in the restaurant expected. A young waitress named Mara Ellison looked directly into Vivienne's eyes and refused to lower her head. What Vivienne didn't know was that the woman standing in front of her had already survived something far more frightening than a wealthy woman's anger, and this time, Mara had nothing left to lose. Welcome back to Compassion Chronicles, where every story reminds us that kindness can change lives and courage can come from the most unexpected places. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and treating every person with dignity, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to Compassion Chronicles. And before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your comments mean more than you know. Mara had worked at the elegant Bellmont House for nearly 3 years. She knew every corner of the restaurant, every regular customer, and every hidden struggle behind the polished smiles of the staff. She was 27, quiet by nature, and the kind of person who remembered a customer's favorite tea without being asked. She worked double shifts whenever someone called in sick, and despite earning barely enough to cover rent and her grandmother's medication, she never complained. Her grandmother, Odette, had raised her after Mara lost her parents as a teenager, and caring for the elderly woman had become the center of Mara's life. The restaurant was not simply a job to her. It was the thin bridge keeping her family from falling apart. Then there was Vivienne Harrow, the wife of millionaire businessman Conrad Harrow. She rarely visited the restaurant without leaving someone in tears. She considered employees invisible unless they made a mistake, and whenever she entered, everyone seemed to hold their breath. Managers would rush toward her table, apologizing before she had even complained. Servers competed desperately to avoid being assigned to her. Even experienced employees whispered that keeping Vivienne happy was more important than keeping the customers happy. One rainy Thursday evening, Vivienne arrived unexpectedly. Mara was carrying a tray of champagne glasses when she saw the woman enter wearing an expensive ivory coat and an expression of absolute displeasure. The restaurant manager, Gideon Vale, immediately hurried toward her. But before he could greet her properly, Vivienne noticed a tiny water stain on one of the polished tables near the entrance. Her face tightened. She demanded to know who was responsible for such unacceptable service, and Gideon immediately pointed toward Mara. Mara froze. She knew she had cleaned that table less than 10 minutes earlier, and the stain had not been there. Still, she quietly apologized and reached for a cloth. Vivienne stepped closer and told her that apologies were meaningless when people lacked competence. Several employees looked away. Everyone expected Mara to accept the humiliation as they always did. But then Vivienne noticed Mara's hands trembling. Instead of softening, she became crueler. She accused Mara of pretending to be hardworking while embarrassing the establishment and declared that someone like her should be grateful simply to work in a place where wealthy people dined. The word struck Mara harder than Vivienne could have imagined. For months, Mara had endured exhaustion, fear, and financial pressure without saying anything. But that morning, she had received a call from the clinic telling her that Odette's treatment would be delayed unless the remaining payment was made within the week. Mara looked at the stain, then at Vivienne, and finally at the frightened employees standing nearby. Something inside her changed. She realized that if she stayed silent again, nothing would ever change. With a calmness that surprised even herself, Mara explained that she had cleaned the table, that the stain had appeared afterward, and that she would gladly correct the problem. But she would not accept being insulted simply because someone had more money than she did. The restaurant became completely silent. Vivienne stared at her as if nobody had ever spoken to her that way. Gideon looked horrified. Mara expected to be fired immediately. Instead, something unexpected happened. One of the older servers, a woman named Celeste Rowan, stepped forward and quietly confirmed that she had seen another employee accidentally spill water near the table minutes earlier. Then another worker admitted that everyone had been afraid to say anything because they knew Vivienne would blame whoever was closest. For the first time, Vivienne had no easy target. She demanded to see the restaurant's owner. But before anyone could move, Conrad Harrow entered through the front doors. He had come to meet a business partner and had witnessed the final moments of the confrontation. Everyone expected him to defend his wife. Instead, Conrad looked at the employees and asked how long they had been afraid of her. No one answered. That silence told him everything. Conrad had always known Vivienne could be demanding, but he had never understood how deeply her behavior affected people. He listened as employees described the insults, threats, and humiliations they had endured. Then Mara quietly explained that she had not spoken up to embarrass Vivienne. She had spoken because she was tired of watching good people become afraid of someone simply because that person had money. Conrad turned toward his wife. He told her that wealth could buy beautiful rooms, expensive clothes, and luxurious meals, but it could never buy respect. Respect had to be earned. Vivienne's anger slowly disappeared. For the first time, she looked around and saw what everyone else had been seeing all along, frightened employees lowering their eyes whenever she entered. She looked at Mara, expecting hatred, but found something different. Mara was not smiling. She was not celebrating. She simply looked tired. Then Mara revealed the one thing that changed everything. She explained that her grandmother was ill and that losing her job could mean losing their home. She had still chosen to speak because she believed dignity mattered even when life was difficult. Vivienne's expression softened. She quietly apologized, not only to Mara, but to everyone in the restaurant. It was not a dramatic apology. There were no excuses and no attempt to blame stress or wealth. She admitted that she had become so accustomed to getting her way that she had forgotten other people had feelings too. Conrad later established a staff protection policy at Bellmont House, ensuring employees could report mistreatment without fear of losing their jobs. Vivienne began visiting the restaurant differently. She learned employees' names, thanked servers for their work, and eventually became one of the restaurant's most generous supporters. She even paid Mara's grandmother's outstanding medical bill, but Mara accepted only after Vivienne promised that the money would never be used to make her feel indebted. Months later, Mara was promoted to guest relations manager. One evening, she stood near the same table where everything had changed. The restaurant was busy, laughter filled the room, and employees moved confidently without fear. Vivienne entered quietly, greeted Mara with a warm smile, and thanked her for having the courage to tell the truth when everyone else was afraid. Mara smiled and told her that sometimes people do not need someone to defeat them. They simply need someone brave enough to show them what they have become. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Compassion Chronicles. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage, compassion, and second chances. And before we reach the final line, comment dignity below if you believe every person deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their money, position, or status. Because in the end, the most powerful person in the room is not always the one with the most money. Sometimes, it is the person who has the courage to stand quietly, speak the truth, and refuse to let fear decide who they are.